Hello and welcome to Psych 250 Developmental Psychology, Class 17 at NDSU, Summer Semester 2017. Today we're talking about family. Just a slight deviation from our syllabus. We're actually just talking about family systems today, not friendships. Friendships will be our class tomorrow, friendships and peer aggression. I realized that it made more sense to divide them that way, so I've made that switch. So yes, we're going to be talking about family. In keeping with my Star Wars, our meme today is what is I guess Luke and Leia's family. You know, they've got the dad, and then Luke and Leia, and then C-3PO and R2-D2 are also included in the family. That's really sweet. Looking ahead, so tomorrow we're talking about peer aggression and friendship, and then Thursday and Friday you're on your own to watch Mean Girls. So I've posted on Blackboard a link to the full version of the film, I believe, on YouTube, but you can also watch it on Netflix. I would recommend the Netflix version myself, if you have Netflix. If you don't have Netflix and you'd rather just rent it, you can also rent it on Amazon Video for like $2.99. So definitely not that expensive. Your quiz will be on Friday. You can take it between Friday and then Monday the 17th. Okay. Um, all right. Let's get started. So we're talking about family systems and then changes that occur in those family systems that can affect a person's development. And I asked you the question while you were preparing for class today, what is a family? And you all had different perspectives on what a family is. Well, the the official definition, at least for this class, of what a family is a group of people associated by birth, marriage, relationship, or cohabitation. In other words, it's just people who associate with each other. And it is the most basic social unit that exists in our society. Now, the cool thing about a family is one, you don't have to live together, right? So you can be people who are associated with each other, but you don't live together. And you also don't have to be biologically related to the people that who you consider your family. It's a social relationship. There are many different types of families, so there's more than just what we would think about, probably instinctively. There's the nuclear family, often called a traditional family, which is kind of a loaded term, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, so the nuclear family, and then we have a single parent family, a blended family, a chosen family, and then a family that's called a married with no kids. So it's still a family, there's no kids involved. So let's start by talking about the nuclear family. A nuclear family is a family with multiple caregivers and their offspring, and it's often the family of origin. And it's our most common family type, making up about 70% of families. And it can be comprised of many different combinations. You can have a mom and dad, two moms, two dads, and the parents may not be married. You could have multiple parents. You could have, using our figurines again, we could have Disdain and Joy are a couple and they have kids, and Fear is the father. He donated the sperm for Disdain's pregnancy, and so he's involved in the family. Um, as the parental donor and is involved. You could have a situation where you have a polyamorous couple polyamorous relationship, people in a polyamorous relationship who are co-parenting together. You could have pretty any kind of situation. The point is that you have caregivers living with their biological offspring or their adopted offspring. Um, and then grandparents could also be part of the nuclear family. So you've got the caregivers, you've got biological children, adopted children, surrogate children, and then you can also have grandparents or other family members who are cohabiting, living, parenting with you. So that could also be a nuclear family. That's why I have trouble with the idea of a traditional family, because it's like, what does that even mean? Like, family is much more complicated than that. Okay, another common type, the third most common type, in fact, family is a single parent family. And this is a family with one primary custodial caregiver and their offspring. Um, and so a single parent family is not a family per se in which a person only has a mom or only has a dad. A single parent family is a family that there's only one parent who has custody. So or has primary custody. So you could have, say a mom and dad get divorced, and mom is the primary custodial caregiver. She's the one who has primary custody, but dad also has custody. He's just not the primary custodial caregiver. That's still a single parent family, unless you can argue it could be also a nuclear family if both parents have custody and they both co-parent equally. In other words, they don't live together necessarily, but they both play an active day-to-day role. That could still be a nuclear family. The difference with a single parent family, though, is that one parent is really more active day to day. Factors that lead to single parent familyhood: divorce, pretty common, death of a partner, adoption by an unpartnered person, or a pregnancy outside of marriage, which is pretty common. Um, okay, so it's the third most common type of family. About 26% of families in the US are um, single parent. That doesn't make sense. 70 and 26. How is it the third most common? Hold that statistic. I don't know if that statistic. I may have messed that one up, but it is. I know for a fact it is the third most common type. So there are 13.6 million single parents raising 21 million children. So that's a lot of kids um, being raised by single parent families. 80% of those families are led by the mom, so they're a matrilineal. Um, I'm sorry. 16% are led by the father, and then the remaining 4% are led by grandparents. A blended family, I believe, is the second most common type of family, and this is a family comprised of two or more caregivers and their offspring. So, in other words, say Joy and Disdain were both married. Joy was married to anger, and Sadness was married to, or Disdain was married to fear. And then they both got divorced and married each other. And so they both brought kids into the relationship. So that would be a blended family. Um, it's as we have already talked about, 49% or 45% maybe of marriages end in divorce, and 60% of divorced people remarry. And this can be a really stressful time for kids. It's going to be a hard adjustment. We've talked about this when we talked about middle childhood. Adolescents can experience a harder adjustment with step parents, especially when they favor their own children over the stepchild. So, say in this relationship, Disdain's kids have problems with Joy because she really favors her own kids more and she gives them special treatment. That could be an issue. Then this is a new concept for a lot of people, but chosen family is another type of family that we don't really think about being family, but it is actually indeed a family system. And this is a family comprised of biological relatives, friends, and other people who affirm and love you. So these are people that you are associated with by choice. You don't really have a choice when it comes to a nuclear family, a single parent family, or a blended family. You kind of just it's marriage, you stuck with them because of marriage or because of birth, right? Chosen family, you pick the people who are in it. This actually was developed from the LGBTQ plus rights movement as a reaction to familial rejection. So you've got LGBT people experiencing up to 49% of them experiencing parental rejection. Instead of not having a family, you just create your own family with the people who love you. And so it can be your mother and father could be part of your chosen family, but also friends that you have. I personally, I have a chosen family. I don't consider my nuclear family to be my family. I have a chosen family that I have that's comprised of the people who love and support me. And it may or may not actually contain members of family of origin. So you may have a chosen family. Your family may be the maybe only your friend, like people who are your friends or are people that you associate with that you met. They're not people that you share any kind of blood or historical connection to. It's actually becoming pretty common among all populations, especially now. People are becoming more likely to value their chosen family over their biological relatives, and honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing. Um, it's it's a sort of a fallacy to think that you have to be um, close to and have relationships with people that you're related to by blood. I mean, it's kind of it's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Like, if you don't like them, why do you spend time with them? Because you've got the same DNA? Well, like that's kind of a dumb reason to hang out with people. Like, it's ridiculous. So, chosen family is becoming very if you like your biological family, then that's another story. But if you don't like them, then why are you spending time with them? So chosen family is becoming a lot more common. And then the last the last type of family, and I think this is cool, and I never thought about this as a family system until recently, and I thought, it really is. But this is the married, no kids family. And this is a dyadic or triadic, so it could be polyamorous as well, where the partners are the only members, so there are no offspring at all. And traditionally speaking, though, this was a short lived unit between marriage and the first pregnancy, or the final stage of a nuclear family when all the children have moved out. But today it's becoming more common as a deliberate unit at all stages of adulthood, meaning there are adults who deliberately do not want to have kids. They're married or partnered with each other. Maybe they have dogs or cats or not, but they don't have kids and they don't ever intend to have kids. And so that's their family is literally going to be this way forever, um, until one of them dies, I suppose. And it says 27% of families are classified this way, but I'm not trusting any of these statistics, so just ignore the statistics. I think I may have messed something up when I made this slide, because the math does not add up at all. So um, that's sort of what happens when you combine a bunch of different slides. This is originally different lectures, and I made it into one. So don't don't go off the statistics. Just completely ignore them. I won't ask you any questions about them. Now, this is not a family type, but this is definitely a thing that we're seeing more in terms of family systems, where you have a nuclear family that is being headed by two moms or two dads. And the reason this is becoming more common is we've seen an increase in adoption and surrogacy among same sex couples. And so there's this question of whether or not is this healthy, is this good, is this bad, and reality is that research indicates there are no significant differences in psychosocial development outcomes. So in other words, kids from with two moms or two dads turn out just fine. Um, in fact, what the research does show is that children of same sex couples tend to feel more loved and more accepted by their parents, often because those parents have experienced rejection in really horrible ways, and so they tend to be much more accepting of their children. Now, you will hear this, and this is true, that studies have found higher risk for mental health issues among children with two moms and two dads. But this this higher risk is explained by social factors. So lack of acceptance, lack of legal recognition of the family, that actually has a huge impact that lawmakers don't think about, is that it actually harms children of LGBT parents when there isn't legal recognition of their relationship or of their family, because children sense that and they feel lack of stability, and children need stability. So basically, what we know is that there's nothing wrong with having two moms or two dads, but if you live in a society where you're mistreated, you're going to have a lot more problems. And it's not because of the mom or the dad, the moms and the dads, it's because of the government and society not being accepting. But I mean, we knew this, didn't we? That happens to anybody regardless of their identity. But what about we have two moms and two dads? What about one mom and one dad? Is this an issue? And this is what I mean by this is you just have a mom or you just have a dad. So single parent homes. We have seen in the last 50 years or so an increase in single parent homes. And so there is a concern. Is having one parent not a good thing? And the research has indicated there is an increased risk for academic issues and substance use issues among children in single parent homes. But when you add in SES group as a factor, that explains it. So in other words, it's not nothing intrinsic about having a single parent. It has everything to do with the poverty level. And so single parents tend to be more poor or poorer because it's hard. Usually what happens is you have the child in high school or in college and you don't finish, and so you don't get a good job. Typically that's what ends up happening with a lot of these single parents. Now, some single parents it happens later, and those parents typically are higher SES. But the low income single parents that we think about are the ones that have the child in high school or in college and the mom was not able to finish school. Children, so in other words, if you're a child of a single parent and your parent has of a middle or upper SES, then you're fine. You'll be fine. There won't be any major issues. Children of single parents tend to feel like they get more attention from their parent than those with married parents, and that's because usually if you're a single mom or a single dad, the only person you have to show love to is your child. Now, this doesn't mean that mom and dad don't date, right? But the deepest relationship that they have is going to be with their child, so it's going to be a much more emotionally connected relationship. There also tends to be more involvement in single homes and single parent families by extended families, so grandparents, aunties and uncles, maybe sisters and brothers are more involved. So you have another positive is you end up having as a child with a single parent more involvement with your grandparents than maybe other children do. I did not grow up in a single family home. My mom was in graduate school, so my grandmother actually took care of me during the day. So that was really good because I got to know my grandmother really well. And actually my family was really poor when I was born, and so we lived with my great grandmother for a while, and so she was also part of my nuclear family at the time. So I got to really have a good relationship with her. I actually took her last name when I came out. So Corba is not my family of origin's name. So so yeah, I think that there's a lot to be said about having involved grandparents. What we basically know, what we've learned over the course of family research is that the type of family doesn't matter. It's the stability in the home that matters. So economic stability and emotional stability can both make or break your childhood. Children who live in an economically unstable home or children who live in an emotionally unstable home tend to fare a lot worse over the course of their life than children who had economic stability and emotional stability. One of these alone is enough to be a factor that reduces positive developmental trends. Both together almost certainly will mean negative emotional trends or negative developmental trends because economic stability is bad, but you usually can ride it out. When you have the emotional instability in there as well, that's when there's an issue, real issue. Children can survive economic hardship. It's hard to not have a good emotional stability with emotionally stable relationship with your parent or with both of your parents. We also know that a warm parent-child relationship fosters stability and positive psychosocial development. And so this is all about parenting style. Parents who are warm and use positive discipline tend to have children who are much more stable. And it doesn't matter what the gender of the parents are, whether or not there's two of them in the house, three of them in the house, one of them in the house. Um, if they have a good parenting style, that makes all the difference. Also, the level of autonomy a child's given. Children need a lot of autonomy, especially when they get older. You can't control your children, otherwise they don't have a lot of stability in later life. So that's what matters. It doesn't matter the composition of the home. This idea that you have to have a specific type of home and a specific type of family just doesn't stand up to scientific scrutiny as being necessary for long-term stability. A lot of what we do in developmental psychology is informed by what's called family systems theory. And family systems theory is proposes that individuals cannot be understood in isolation but as part of their family. And let me break that down for you. You all have a family of some kind, whether you have a nuclear family, a single parent home family, a blended family, a chosen family. Um, you have a family, and the experiences that you had in your family affect you as a person and who you are, your identity, the way that you see the world, the way that you react to things as a result of the family in which you grew up, your family of origin. And so, family systems theory says that in order to understand an individual, in order to understand anger, we have to look at anger's family and understand how his family system and the experiences of that system and the experiences he had within that system have affected his development. And what it proposes is that families are systems of interconnected and interdependent individuals. In other words, in a family, anger and sadness are a couple and they have a child, Fear. Okay? The experiences of anger contribute to the whole family's experiences. The experiences of sadness contribute to the whole family's experiences. And the experiences of fear experience to the experiences of fear contribute to the experiences of the whole family. And what that means is all of these collective experiences create the environment in which this family operates. And so what affects one member of the system affects all of them. If anger loses his job, then sadness and fear will also suffer. If fear is being bullied at school and he's just upset all the time and really depressed, it is going to affect both sadness and anger. They're going to have a hard time coping with that. If you know sadness is very sick, that can bring down the emotional health of both anger and fear, and potentially it could make it hard for them to do the things that they need to do. Um, And what we found in research is that maternal depression, so the mom being depressed, is positively related to the development of adolescent depression. In other words, we can't say that it causes it, but we can say there is a link that when a mom is depressed, the teenagers tend to also be depressed. There is some kind of a link there. And that's because everyone is interdependent on each other. And I think I have a good example, a good personal example of this. My dad, um, when I was growing up, my dad stayed home with us kids. And we had sort of a non-traditional family in that sense. My mom worked, my dad stayed home with us, but he did work part-time in the evenings at Walmart as an assistant store manager. And so my dad um, one night it was very stormy in Alabama. It rains. When it rains, it's pretty violent. Like it's so humid already that when it rains, it just like everything is just wet, dripping wet. Like the walls are wet, everything is wet. If you don't have good insulation, you're screwed. Um, and so it gets very slippery even on the porch. So like you've got a covering over the porch, right? But the floor, there's already humidity in the air, and so when you get the humidity up to 100, there's literally water on every surface. And so my dad was leaving for work, and it was raining, and he fell coming out the front door and slid down the stairs and broke his leg in two places, at the base of his fibia and at the top of his tibula. No, base of his fibula and the top of his tibia. It's the two bones in the leg, in the lower leg. And so he didn't work for 6 months. And my grandmother had to come stay with us and help take care of him. It was a really, he had to have like multiple surgeries. It put a great strain on our family. It was very hard for us to cope with that. It was hard for him too, but it affected all of us. And my mom was pregnant, and so it put her pregnancy at high risk, which then increased the stress level for all of us. It was a really hard time. And my mom wasn't able to work because she was about to go on maternity leave. She actually was taking an extended, it was, I think it was at the beginning of the summer too, which was, no, 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 it wasn't at the beginning of the summer. It was at the end of the summer. It was just a really bad year. And like, my mom had decided she was going to take a year off of work. And so, I mean, it was a big risk for her, right? Because we don't have paid maternity leave. So my dad was working more, and like, it just was not a good thing. It was a horrible situation for our family, and so it was not good, and it affected all of us. And we it contributed to my own depression as a teenager. I had a really rough time dealing with it. Um, in the end, everything worked out, and everyone was fine. But it was a very scary time for us all. And it really did impact a lot of our development. And that family systems theory would say that, well, that makes sense because everyone is dependent upon each other in a family. And we ultimately rely on our family for stability, for connection, for emotional intimacy. Um, and family can be really important. And I've said before, I grew up in a large family. I have 7 siblings. Um, and well, 8 if you count my brother-in-law. And family has always been very important to me. It's always been a very central part of my life, and so it's it's hard. And when you have a family that big, it is hard. You get affected. My sister has been sick for about 8 months, and it's one of the reasons why I'm moving back to Alabama. And even though I've been 1,400 miles away from that and pretty much removed from it, it still affects me because what happens in our family really does affect everyone in it. Along with family, we do have a pretty common problem called family strife. And family strife is it's any kind of interpersonal issue that exists between caregivers. And divorce often is the outcome of that, and that can account for a large proportion of family strife. So essentially, this family strife is synonymous with a lack of emotional stability in the home, and what typically we can expect to see from people experiencing a lot of family strife is bad academic outcomes, for example. Um, Increased risk for mental health issues, increased risk for delinquency and other risk behaviors. So that is a huge part of family strife as it exists. It can create a lot of emotional instability in the home. And this is an example of how a family system works, where you have caregivers who are having interpersonal issues or who are divorced, and that affects the children. It affects the children's academic outcome, their mental health, and their risk for being involved in risky behaviors. Um, Adolescence is a big time actually in a family's history when there's a lot of family strife, and that's because the struggle for autonomy and changing roles between the caregiver and the teen can be a significant stressor in the family systems. And during this period, as we'll talk about tomorrow, adolescents transition towards stronger peer relationships. And so that transition away from the parent being sort of the main figure in that child's life can be really hard for parents, and there can be a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements that crop up because of that. Um, the good thing is, though, in all of this, is that adolescents still retain most of their parental values. So this idea that all teenagers are rebellious and they completely reject their parents and their parents' beliefs is not true. children naturally explore beliefs, and that is normal and it is a good thing. But most of the time, they retain what they've been taught by their parents. Even I'm like the poster child for the rebellious college student, right? Because I completely threw off my parents' religion, the plans they had for me, the name they gave me, the gender that they conditioned me in. I threw all of that away. But I still retain a lot of their values that they're most fundamental. I still believe in kindness. I still am a Christian. I'm just not their version of it. I believe in honesty and integrity. I believe in loving people um, and being sacrificial with the people that I love. Those are all things that my parents taught me. Those are all things that really make up the core of their. Oh, and the biggest one is standing by your beliefs. That is one thing that my parents really drilled into me that I still hold as a core value. It's always stand up for what you think is right. I don't agree with my parents on a lot of things. I don't agree with some of the things that they think are right. But I do respect the fact that they stand up for it. They're consistent. Consistency is a big deal in my family, and it's something that I've retained. So when we talk about adolescents retaining parental values, that's often what happens is they may not practice some of the same things their parents practice. They may not arrive at the same places as their parents, but they retain those basic core identity values. So if you have a teenager and they're arguing with you, or you have a little child, I know one of you has a little child, don't worry. They're probably going to be exactly who they need to be, and they're going to remember all the things that you taught them, because that's what children do. If you have a warm relationship with them, they're not going to forget what you've taught them. They may live their life differently, but they're going to be basically the person that you hope that they will be. Okay, for our discussion for today, tell me what your ideal family is like. I'm curious to know now that we've talked about family systems. Maybe you already have a family and you're just going to describe your own family, that's fine. But tell me what your ideal family is, and I'll tell you what mine is because we have plenty of time because this was a really short lecture today. Um, so, what I'm looking forward to in my life is a time when I can come home and my partner is either there or will be there soon, and my kids, because I'm gonna have at least one kid. I'm gonna adopt a kid, even if it's an unofficial adoption where this like LGBT kid gets kicked out of their home and like they need somewhere to stay, and I let them stay with me. Like that's gonna be me. That's totally gonna be me. I already know that because I see all these Facebook posts about these kids that are like homeless, and I'm like, because their parents kicked them out of their home for being gay or lesbian or trans, and I'm just like, oh, come live with me, and I'm like, no, you don't have any money, don't be giving these kids support. But I just feel really strongly about it. Um, and I come home and my kids gets home and we talk about our day, and we're not like gonna always be hanging out together, but the most important thing will be that we are there for each other and we're honest with each other and we care about each other and we have dinner together. That's important to me. I'm so old fashioned. I don't care if you have breakfast or lunch together, but you have to have at least one meal together. I prefer supper. It's my favorite meal of the day. Um, or dinner. We call it dinner in the South. But, well, dinner is the biggest meal of the day. So for me, supper is dinner. Um, so yeah, that's important to me. And I don't know, just I want a family that's built on respect and trust and warmth and honesty. That's really important to me. So that's my ideal family. I don't care if it's a single parent home. I hope it's not, but but I'm open to that. I don't care if it's a blended family. In fact, I kind of would like that, to be honest. I think blended families are really amazing. Um, and or if it's just married, no kids, and we just have dogs, and I take care of my nieces and nephews because I'll have plenty of them. Um, uh, I don't care. I just want something that's like built on trust and respect and honesty. All right, that's it. That's all I've got for you. Coming in at 35 minutes. So you get a break. For tomorrow, read pages 417 to 421. Not very much to read. I want you to think about while you're reading, who are your friends and why are they your friends? Remember, you're on your own for Mean Girls this week. You can find it's going to be posted on Thursday. There'll be links will be posted for the video, and then there's nothing to do. Just read and relax. All right. Have a good day. Let me know if I can do anything. Darcy.corbetthall, CORBITTHALL @NDSU.edu. See you later.